Police in Hong Kong have taken dramatic action to break up the mass demonstration. They've fired rubber bullets, tear gas and water cannon to end Sunday's protest. Demonstrators defaced and tore down signs congratulating China's Communist Party, which will mark its 70th anniversary on Tuesday. The solidarity marches are planned throughout major cities around the world. We can go live now to our correspondent Sarah Clarke, who's there in Hong Kong, and it seems very much as though the riot police are moving very swiftly and decisively to try to shut down this latest demonstration.
We have had dramatic scenes. We've had actual chaos throughout central Hong Kong. You might be able to see the police behind me. We've got the Raptors, who are the Special Tactical Response Unit. They've now moved in, and that shows the escalation of anger from the police. When these guys move in, this means that they want to clear out the crowd. We've got the police on my left as well. That's the riot police. And as I've mentioned earlier, this march was started in Causeway Bay. It never actually got officially started on the grounds that the riot police moved in and tried to head off the march, which was meant to go from Causeway through to Central, where we are now. They dispersed those protesters, firing a number of rounds of tear gas, pepper spray, rubber bullets and sponge grenades. The protesters did manage to get to the Legislative Council and Government Headquarters building, which is behind me. They were throwing various petrol bombs, devices, bricks into behind the barricades, and that's when the police used the water cannons, which was dosed with a blue dye, which, as I've mentioned before, this blue dye is used to help identify those protesters who are on the front line, and this helps those police make the arrests down the track. But we've seen, as you mentioned, dramatic scenes here in Hong Kong as the police have escalated the level of tactics and techniques they've used to try and disperse the crowd on another weekend of protests.
But Sarah, I hope you can hear me. Sarah, I mean, this march was unauthorised, wasn't it? The protesters did seek permission for their demonstration, but that was not granted.
They didn't seek permission for this march on the grounds. I think they knew they weren't going to get approval. And in previous weeks, these protests, they have gone ahead without the police approval. So therefore, it was considered an unlawful assembly. But in previous weeks, these marches have still managed to get to their destination. Today, they were dispersed early. So clearly, the riot police are using different techniques to try and disperse the crowd earlier rather than later. And as we've mentioned also before, is that they're preparing, or that we've got preparations in place for October 1, which is China's National Day. This is the celebration from the pro-Chinese groups of the 70th anniversary of the founding of the Republic of China. And the police want to make sure the streets are clear by then. And as a result, I think they've increased their tactics, or escalated their tactics today, by firing tear gas early in central, very busy parts of Hong Kong. We're talking in front of shopping centres with onlookers, shoppers and tourists within that vicinity. So it certainly shows that the level of frustration from the police side. And I should say the protesters haven't pulled back. They were moving in. At one stage, we had a number of rounds of tear gas being fired on those protesters, and there would have been hundreds at the front line at one stage in front of an area called Pacific Place. But the protesters didn't move back. They simply hold their umbrellas up and shield themselves from that tear gas. And then the police retreated, and the protesters have again moved forward. So they've managed to get to their destination, which is government headquarters.
And it wasn't that long ago, was it, Sarah, that we saw starkly contrasting scenes, a very peaceful demonstration with large banners and people singing?
Yes, I mean, we've had a number of rallies that have attracted the 1 and 2 million people on the Sundays here. They've been organised by the Civil Human Rights Front. Those rallies have been very peaceful. We had peaceful rallies yesterday, which was Saturday here in Hong Kong, that we had tens of thousands of people in front of the Legislative Council building at Tamar Park. They were peaceful, but this group of protesters who are here today on Sunday, they are showing that they want to escalate the level of violence on their side, and the police have retaliated. And you might be able to see there's still tear gas being fired behind us, but they're using a number of tactics today, including, as I mentioned, rubber bullets, sponge grenades and pepper spray.
And as you've already mentioned, Sarah, presumably tensions are mounting by the hour, given that there's such an important day coming up on Tuesday.
Yes, and on Monday they've called for a general strike, and there are more protests, anti-government protests, which will be held on Tuesday. We've had pro-China rallies here on Sunday in Hong Kong, in Kowloon, as well as up at the Peak, but that was a small group of around 100. Today, on Sunday here, we've seen the anti-government protests increase in numbers. We've had tens of thousands of people with their umbrellas march from Causeway Bay to Central, and we still have a standoff going on in central Hong Kong as we speak.
All right, for now, Sarah, thank you. Sarah Clarke, live in Hong Kong.